you've ever wondered about how to make a pinecone wreath, we've got some good news. It's easier than you think. Hi creative friends, I'm Jane from Sustain My Craft Habit, and today we're so happy to share with you our foolproof tutorial for how to make a beautiful pinecone wreath without using glue or wires. To say that we have a thing for pine cones is a bit of an understatement. We've been selling pine cones in our Etsy shop for over 5 years now, and for the last few years have been selling beautiful pinecone wreaths there as well. Now, today we're spilling all our secrets for how you can make your own using Eastern white pine cones. These wreaths make beautiful decor year-round, but are especially popular for the holidays, and this craft is something that you can make and sell at craft fairs, bazaars, or to give as gifts for the holidays to those especially who are hard to shop for. So let's get started.
Okay, so to get started, these are the materials that you're going to need. A wire wreath form, and this measures 14 inches in diameter, and it has 4 rows of wire. So that's your base, and then you need some Eastern white pine cones. So there's different types of pine cones, and for this particular wreath, these are the variety of pine cones that we use. Eastern white pines grow very well in our area, which is southwestern Ontario, Canada. These pine trees produce these pine cones every 4 years. So whenever we see them, we are sure to go and collect as many as we possibly can. And then the other material that you're going to need is some large bowl, like I have this very big bowl, or an even larger pail that you're going to fill with water. So that's basically it. Just those 3 things that you need to have on hand to put together this pinecone wreath, which means that you don't need to use any wires, floral wires, or any other fasteners to secure the pine cones on. So I have in my hand here the ready to go pine cones. So these have been cleaned, baked, and ready to start making my wreath. But we want to show you the difference. So this box here is our collection of pine cones that we've collected. As you can see, they're pretty messy. They have a bunch of these pine needles, even leaves, and they have dirt because often we've collected them from the ground, and they're not all necessarily just freshly fallen. So sometimes they've been there for a few weeks or maybe a month. So this is what it'll look like if you are going to go collect your own Eastern white pine cones. But don't let that stop you, because you can get from this to this, and we'll show you how. So after we've collected our pine cones, what we do is remove all of the dirt and pine needles and leaves. Just take it all off. Like pick it off and then discard this. We don't need this, so we put it aside. So we do that with all of the pine cones, and then line a baking sheet with aluminum foil. And it's a pretty old baking sheet. We wouldn't use it to bake with anymore, but we use it specifically for our pine cones. So we have this tray ready, and we begin to place these pine cones that have the pine needles removed and the leaves, but they need to be put into the oven, because the one thing with these types of pine cones is that they're very sappy, so they feel very sticky. So even my fingers right now feel really, really sticky. By placing them in the oven for a little while, it hardens the sap and it gives them a really pretty sheen. You can see with this. So this has been baked, and you see how they are no longer sticky, or I'm telling you, they're no longer sticky, and they do have this really pretty glossy edge tipping on all of the edges. So when we place this in the oven, we bake them at 240 degrees for 30 minutes at the most, and then we remove them and then let them cool before we go ahead and handle them. And now that our pine cones are ready for crafting with, what we have to do first is separate them by size. So you do want to have your larger pine cone separated from your smaller one. So just to give you an example. So here's a smaller one, here is a larger one. So my first thing I would do is just separate them to create 2 separate piles, and then it'll make it easier and faster as you're working on your wreath. Now that I have some sorted, I'm going to take my pine cones and place them in a large bowl or a large pail, or both in actually probably our case, and I'm going to submerge them in water and add as many as I need. So for this size of a wreath, you need about 150 to 200 pine cones. That varies depending on the size of your pine cones. but that's just a rough estimate. And what you want to do now is submerge these in water and make as many and do that for as many of the pine cones as you need if you're going to be making the wreath all in one go. Okay, so you might be wondering, why are we soaking these in water? Well, you'll see after about 45 minutes, you'll find that the pine cones will start to close. And you see how these are nice and open because they're dried, and especially because they've been baked, so they're open as much as they possibly can be. But by adding water to them, they're going to close right up. And then that's what you're going to want to work with. So as you're creating your wreath, you're going to be using wet pine cones. With these, you want to every now and then come back to the bowl or the pail and just press them down so that they're all evenly getting soaked in the water. So even this one, look how quickly, it may not even be 45 minutes, half an hour at the most, and they'll be closed right up. Okay, so if you're finding that you don't have enough space for all of the pine cones, one tip is that you just need to really submerge the bottom half of the pine cone. So if you want to stack them kind of upwards like this so that the top of the pine cone sticking out of the water, that's totally fine, because technically you don't need the whole pine cone to close. You just really only need the bottom half of the pine cone closed. So that'll save you some space. You can add more pine cones to the bowl or the pail that you're using, or a bowl in this case because it's wider and shallower. Okay, so it's been about 30 minutes now since I first added the water. I've gone and added more pine cones than I had initially, so it's definitely fuller. But just to show you the difference, so after 30 minutes, we have the pine cones looking like this. Whereas when I first took them out of the oven, they were nice and open like this. So from this to this. I think I have enough here to get started. So I think we're gonna put the bowl aside, grab my wire form, and start to put the wreath together. I have my surface ready. I have placed a towel across my table, and the table that I'm using is an outdoor glass patio table, so I'm not worried at all about the water that's gonna go on it. So keep that in mind. You wanna make sure that you're using a surface that can get wet, because the pine cones are wet. So as you're working with them, taking them out from the bowl or the pail, water is going to start to accumulate and the surface is going to get pretty wet. Be sure to keep that in mind. Don't work on your hardwood floors, for example, or on a wooden table. Now I have my wreath form here, and I have my pine cones. So I've separated, these are the smaller sized ones, which I'm gonna use for the inner ring. And then I have my larger pine cones here, which are gonna go in the outer 2 rings. So to get started, I'm going to start and work my way around. So pick anywhere, any spots along the wreath. And I'm going to insert one of the pine cones, and I'm gonna push it through to about 2 or 3 scales high, and I'm gonna put another one in as well beside it. And these 2 are about the same size of pine cones. Then I'm gonna grab another pine cone, maybe a little bit smaller than the first row, and then I'm going to insert that as well. But I'm going to insert it in the second row here. I'm going to do another one, same thing, and I'm pushing them in really tight, close together. So I'm like, with all my force, I'm squeezing it to the bar here that's holding it in place. So I'm going to work one section at a time all the way around. Now I'm going to work on this inner row. So I'm going to grab the smaller pine cone, and I'm going to just reserve these smaller pine cones for this inner ring. And the other thing to keep in mind is you want this row, this inner ring of pine cones, to stay upright as much as possible. So avoid inserting them in this direction, because that's how they're gonna open. So then your wreath is gonna start to look kind of closed in the center. So you wanna make sure that this row of pine cones is standing upright. These pine cones here, so I'm just gonna kind of continue in the same way all the way around.
Did you know that most people who see this video aren't actually subscribed to our channel? So if you enjoy this project, please be sure to hit that subscribe button for our next nature-inspired video.
Okay, so I've finished this section of pine cones and just want to touch on a few things. So this row of pine cones here, along the outer ring, they are all kind of facing outward. So I have them out, a little bit angled. The tips are facing that way. And then along the second row of pine cones, I have them kind of a mixture of standing upright and also slightly angled, not as much as the first row, but also slightly angled outward. And then I have my inner row of pine cones. They are all upright. And I've squished them all in. I mean, I could maybe squeeze another one in there. You want to really fill in as much as possible. And that's why I have this tool here, or like screwdriver is going to work as well. But then that helps to push them closer together, and then I'm going to grab another small one and force it inside that little opening. So I really want to get as many of them in as possible, and then that's how once they open up, they're all going to be stuck in there really nicely and they're not going to come loose. You want to make sure that you're pushing them in enough so you don't want them to come loose. So definitely when you are placing them, let me grab a larger one, you're going to hook the wire on either this scale or this scale. You want to avoid the smaller ones because it could break off and then your pine cones would come loose afterwards. So now I'm going to start this other section here. So as I place them in, I'm going to also make sure that I'm hooking it. So I kind of push it in, but then I pull it out as well so that it's being held in place. So this one I'm just trying to push in a little bit further. So I turned my piece the other way just to help squeeze it in. And then I'm going to use this screwdriver and to help me squeeze in another pine cone like that. And now, so I've done these ones. I got to go back in and put in more in the inner ring here.
You need a high throne where you can be adored. You'll get what you deserve.
There, so the wreath is half done. Look how full it is. As the pine cones dry, the wreath is going to look fuller and fuller. They're going to all open up. So depending on where you put it, so I'm going to, because it's sunny here and hot, I'm going to just leave it outside on the table. If it's going to rain, obviously I'm going to move it indoors, but or into the garage. But I'm going to leave it out and let the sun do its magic, and it's going to help to dry these pine cones out really quickly. I have also made these wreaths in the winter, and I do find, because I can't put them outdoors, they do take longer. So in that case, my particular wreath took 3 days to dry and open up fully, but it was really fun to watch as they slowly and each day just got bigger and bigger. I've placed all of my pine cones in there and I don't have room for any more. So now I'm going to put this aside and let it dry. My hands, I just wash them, but they are still very sticky. If you are not using gloves, like I didn't use gloves, expect for your fingers to feel sticky afterwards. You see it's kind of built up on my nails too. So soap and hot water does take it off. You could use some nail polish remover also, or rubbing alcohol will help remove the stickiness. Consider, or you could also just wear a pair of gloves and then you don't have to worry about the stickiness.
After a few days of drying, your pine cone wreath will be all opened up and beautiful. This is a time where you could add some embellishments like faux florals or a beautiful bow. We've also made a smaller version. You can use a smaller wire frame and downsize your wreath. I added a little wood welcome cut out here. And if you're interested in painting your wreath after it's completely dry, we recommend using just a light coat of spray paint to give it a frosted finish. We love how this white one looks with some festive felt cardinals in there. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you found this tutorial for how to make a pine cone wreath really helpful. I think this trick that you can make them without using any wires or glue is amazing, and I hope you've learned something as well. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. for more nature-inspired crafts and DIY ideas. We think you'll also love this craft project, and we'll see you again soon. Bye!